What are the key areas to work on in the final few weeks of marathon training preparation? Okay, I put this down to three big areas. One is developing confidence in your running form. You want to feel that you're at the top of your game. You want to feel that training has gone well. You're getting faster over the distance, and you're pretty much there and thereabouts about performing at the best you can for this distance. The second is about being able to cope with feeling tired. We know that during a marathon you'll be experiencing pretty intense sensations of fatigue, and so when those sensations come, you need to be able to interpret them as saying, yes, I expected these to come along, they're part of the event, I'm going to treat them with respect, but I'm not going to let them destroy my race. I'm going to learn to cope with them and still perform pretty well. And the third big area is about being able to get yourself into the best psychological and physical logical state before competition. We know that you're likely to be experiencing anxiety and some other intense emotions, and we expect that because this is an important event, and any important event is likely to trigger intense emotions. So it's about using those emotions, harnessing them so that they actually get yourself ready for performing, and if you can do that, then you've given yourself a bit of an advantage. And what we'll look at over the next few slides and few minutes are ways in which we can develop those three areas. So what psychological techniques do you need to know? Well, first, some of the techniques are not necessarily psychological. They're simply about restructuring your training to allow you to develop psychological skills. So it's sort of built into your normal training routine, and this will be probably following something you largely do already, but the difference being is that we're doing it specifically or intentionally to develop some psychological skills that will help you to achieve the sort of outcomes I talked about previously. Let's get to look at some of the psychological skills. Goal setting you probably all know and probably all using to some degree already. And there are two types of goals I want to talk about. One is an outcome goal. This is a certain finish time, certain finish position. It might be that you set a goal to finish your marathon in less than 3 hours or less than 4 hours, and to do so you might be setting training goals in each week to run 100k a week or 120k a week, or variations of that. And for each session you might have goals to run 1 kilometer in less than 4 minutes 10 or 4 minutes 15 or something like that. But there are certain outcomes you want to achieve, and you typically set those in a very sort of matter-of-fact way, and it's clear if you achieve them or not in that respect. The second is process goals, and these are sort of how you achieve the outcomes and what goes on in the meantime. So a process goal might be to relax your arms when you're running, or to find a good rhythm. Another process goal might be to focus on running smoothly. So it's what you do in the meantime. So the process goals are not necessarily linked to outcome goals. Of course, you can be running smoothly and running much slower, but they are different things to focus on. Three techniques I'm going to talk about are going to be imagery, which is about seeing yourself performing or seeing images that help you perform really well, and we'll look at some of the differences between those later. Something called self-talk is about how you talk to yourself, and you try to use that so that sort of invasion of negative talk that comes in so frequently amongst marathon runners and many athletes, to be honest, can be dealt with in a positive way. And third, a really effective technique which I really like is called if-then planning, which allows you to have the solutions to barriers as they come in, so you can use them when they're necessary. And we're going to look at those across three different areas, again, as we said previously. One is about being successful, generating those sensations that you're really performing at your best. Another one is about being able to cope with difficult moments, difficult thoughts, difficult feelings. And then it's about making correct decisions so that you're using the information in the best way possible. That might be about your pace, it might be about the nutritional supplements you're taking on board, it might be about the sort of kit you're going to be wearing, and so on and so forth. There's lots, but you've got to make the correct decisions, and some of these techniques can be really helpful in that respect. Form. How do I do that? Let's look at some of the factors involved, what we can actually do. First is to look at some of the structural issues around when you train and what you do when you're training, or how you can use races to develop this sense of a really robust self-confidence in your current form. Firstly is that this training is best done after a day's rest. In the marathon itself, when you're standing on the start line, you should feel rested, recovered, and you need to be training in that physical, psychological state as well. If it's the first time on the race day that you've been truly rested, you won't really know how that feels. That'll feel different, and that's not helpful for performing very well, because you haven't got a physical and psychological state that you can rely on. So let's look at doing some training when you're feeling rested. Either one day's rest, which is pretty typical build up for a marathon, but it might well be sort of 2 days rest from hard running, where you might have put in some upper body stuff to sort of give the legs a good rest. The types of session can be like a park run, like a hyper park run, I like to think of it, for marathon runners, where you do your quality warm up, and by that meaning the warm up is that you're planning to use on the day of the race, so that you're really well rehearsed in a preparation routine that you know works for you. And that could be some walking, then light jogging, some stretches, but it's one that's finding out something that you do that when you've done it, you say to yourself, yep, I feel ready to go. And parkrun are really good because they're pretty full out, they're free to enter, which appeals to me greatly. As anyone knows me would be able to testify. And the fact that they're regular. They're at 9 o'clock every week, so you can get your breakfast in relation to the run all prepared equally, so that you know that when to eat, when to start doing the warm up. All those pre-run routines that are needed for preparation for the big day can be practiced and re-practiced. So parkrun is really good for that. Other types of session could be doing your interval-based stuff on short reps with reasonable recoveries. The idea that you're always focusing on quality. Same applies to drills, where you're trying to focus on the quality of movement. So psychological things that can be built into that include doing some imagery, imagining good technique. So sitting down there 20 minutes before the session starts, get an image of yourself performing really well, performing really smoothly. I quite like to find an image that actually relates to good technique. So the idea that some sort of continuous movement, and get an idea of picturing someone's running legs running really smoothly, and holding that in your image, holding that in your mind as you prepare, sitting down nice and relaxed, prepare for the training session or race. The idea of imagery of what a good rhythm's like, and that might well be replaying one of your favourite songs, but it might well be just tapping out the rhythm of good fast running, and you know works for you. And you sort of need to know that what that good rhythm is. So when you're actually running in training, is to find that out by just getting a sense of what your running cadence is all about, what the rhythm is, tapping it out. So when you are doing some of your drills, is just pay attention to your feet, listening to how they go, so that you can recall the rhythm that your feet make when you're running really well, and then replaying that in your mind as a means to try and develop a sense of feeling really good about what's about to come. It's about having positive self-statements, about saying to yourself, I can do this today. If it feels really difficult, then I'll say to myself, I'll get into a rhythm. So build those positive statements into if-then plans. And it's about, finally, in this wee section here, it's about having a warm-up routine that you know works. So you have this, say 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever you feel is necessary. Some people like very longer warm-ups, but I like for about 20 minutes before the run, and you know what you're going to start with. So for me, it would be around about a 2k run, and the first k really is very, very slow for me in relation to how quickly I'm going to be going, which would be just to get the body moving with absolutely no expectation that we're going to be starting off very quickly, and no expectation in your mind about what's about to be coming later on. It's just simply to get some blood around your body and start in a really nice and relaxed way. So it's just good. I start that 20 minutes before, and it's a good way of starting, even though the first, say, 900 meters or so feel really awkward. It's like starting a diesel car on a cold morning. It just chugs along. But because I can trust my warm-up routine, I know that it's going to change quite quickly. And then you just go through whatever drills you need to do in order to get yourself in the best state psychologically, whatever stretches you need to do, whatever strides you need to do, and build all those in so that you feel really good that as you get on the start line, you're just about ready to. So how do I learn to cope with intense sensations of fatigue? I think this starts with some practice in training. You know it's coming in the race, and quite a lot of discussion about how to prepare for a marathon is about avoiding these feelings. And yes, on the race day you want to avoid them. You want to put them back as far as possible. The difficulty is that you're also really motivated to achieve a certain time. And if you don't feel particularly tired, you push yourself for going a bit quicker. And that can mean that you meet these intense sensations of fatigue earlier on, even if you are much fitter. So I see them as somewhat as inevitable. They're coming at some point, and you need to prepare for them for when they come. And you develop lots of strategies to do so. And so the first, I think, is to set up practice to cope with difficult parts of a run in training, and set sessions up so that you are going to have to cope with intense sensations of fatigue. The type of fatigue you're going to experience in a marathon is going to be sort of running out of fuel near the end, and it's difficult, of course, in training to run to that extent, but we can manipulate our diet so that we are somewhat depleted going into a fairly hard session. I think this type of training is best done at the end of a period of difficult training. So if you're training for 4 days on the run, then the 5th day can be a very hard session in terms of meeting the goal of developing confidence to cope with intense sensations of fatigue, because they'll come along much earlier. So set the training up in terms of manipulating diet, training when you're already tired, so that you can teach yourself to cope with these difficult sensations. It's really important when you do a session where you're going to be coping with difficult parts, when you're going to be experiencing intense feelings of fatigue, is to see that as the main goal of the session, not necessarily the times, because of course in the early stages of this type of preparation the times can really deteriorate and can really ruin your confidence to be able to manage it on the day of the event. And you get better at it. So set up the idea that it's going to be painful, reduce the expectations of how quick you're going to go in the early stages, and develop a belief that these feelings of intense pain and fatigue are sort of a welcome signal that you're moving towards the goal you want to achieve. It might well be that you're actually moving the goal along, to be honest, and that as you get fitter you can achieve more and more and more. So the types of session would include putting some sort of multiple sprints in at the end of a 2-hour run, so that type of thing. And prior to doing that, you go through the same sort of techniques I talked about previously. So seeing yourself performing, trying to get a feeling of just how tired you're going to be feeling, and getting a rhythm into your running. So see yourself performing, imagine yourself performing and smoothly, but really knowing that there's really intense feelings right at the forefront of your mind, and getting into that rhythm so that you're turning your legs over at the sort of turning your legs over with rhythm in an efficient way. If you can keep the efficiency up, you have a chance of keeping the speed up. If you can keep the momentum going, you again have a chance of keeping the speed up. Even if you start to slow down quite considerably, it's about remaining positive through that experience, so that you get the most out of yourself as you're going along. So set up the sessions so that they are intended, there's an intention for them to feel great difficulty. Prepare so that this is going to hurt a bit. do imagery, get yourself talk positive around prior to going into that session, and try to implement those type of techniques at the point when the fatigue. So how do I get my diet right so I feel powered before the run and be boosted during the run, and when I start getting some sort of indications that the big sense of fatigue is about to kick in? And I think that's due to two main things. I think it's about getting your pre-race diet absolutely super practiced so that you know what you're going to eat, you know it works for you, you know how much to eat, the type of foods to eat, and you feel that once you've eaten it, it gives you a real sense that this is just what I need to get me to perform at my best. The same principle, and this is an area that is really under looked at by lots of runners that I work with, certainly, is practicing the fuel you're going to take on during the run. And if you took on fuel during the runs, whether it's drink or gels, and that gave you a sense of feeling, gave you a massive energy boost, it'd be like starting again, having a day's rest in some ways. It'd be like to start the race again, feeling really positively. I know that might be a little bit overstatement, but at the point when you're starting to feel really fatigued, if you can have something that gives you such a boost, then that's a pretty powerful ally to have. And we've done studies that have looked at the effect of psychological factors where people are really positive about what they take in, and it makes a huge difference. It adds another layer on just how effective any of those supplements can be. So if you're about to take some drink in at 17 miles and you think this is going to be really effective for you, then it adds more of an effect than if you just took the drink and you thought that's just okay. We don't want this belief to be based on some sort of a phony logic where you try and talk yourself into believing that something's really good. That's not the idea. The idea is that you practice in training, and you practice in training so you know what works for you, how much to take, so when you take it there's a deep-rooted belief that it's going to work. So practice on that. The second part, which I think is really important to getting the diet right, is and avoiding overeating, because if you overeat excessively, it just gives you gives you stomach problem, and we know what the most commonly used room is prior to competition. But if you overeat, you've almost guaranteed that you're going to have some trouble in that area. The more you eat, the more it's got to go somewhere. You have reduced your training accordingly, and you're going to possibly feel bloated, but you're definitely going to have trouble at that. You definitely run the risk of having trouble at the other end. So I would look very carefully about that. Is to practice that and have a preset diet so that you know what's going to work, and probably get your energy around more fluid than excessive eating. So looking at developing confidence for the start line, what strategies should I use to help me boost my confidence or give me a real sense of having a robust belief in my ability to cope with this event? I think the starting point to that is reviewing your training diary. Look at what you've done, look at what you've achieved, look at the progress you've made, and that should lead to statements such as, I've done the hard work, now it's my time to perform, and also my time to enjoy this event. Runners don't do that many marathons in their life because it's such a long event, and it's so demanding for a very great number of them. I know some marathon runners run a huge number, and they are the exception rather than the common experience for most people. How many times do you set yourself as a goal to enjoy this, and say to yourself, I'm going to enjoy this goal, it's going to feel painful, but I'm going to enjoy it. And that coupling the idea that it will have some discomfort, but you're going to enjoy it, is pretty much what a marathon's all about. The sense of achievement, of overcoming those sensations of difficulty, are part of the reason, even if you're not really aware of it, or why you entered in the first place. And so you should recognize this is going to be demanding, and set yourself as a goal to enjoy it, as well as trying to achieve whatever outcome you've set as well. Sometimes when people review their goals, they go, I've not achieved that many of them, only about 70% of them. And is that enough? And people become really down on themselves at the idea that they haven't done enough. And that, I think that's really common, and particularly people who set themselves goals that they're probably never going to achieve. And that's sort of a function, some way, of how people are, in that they are very ambitious. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just sometimes when you reflect back on what you set out to do and what you actually did, is that you try to achieve a really hard and difficult goal and missed it by a little bit. But actually, what that meant was that you achieved a lot more than if you put a much lower, much easier goal and achieved it much earlier. So it's just not always that a bad thing to miss the super difficult goal that you set yourself, as long as you get something just below it. And to do that, what I'd start doing, getting really specific about the performance itself, is to get a race plan about how you see the run going. Imagine yourself going through it and doing this on a mile by mile basis, one part, but also moment by moment part is another way of doing it. And there's loads of ways to give it a real clear idea of a marathon. Quite often in the marathons I've done recently, is that the route is on YouTube, and you find the route on YouTube and you see how it plays, and you see some of the bends and turns, and you dig out a hill profile of going ups and going down, and just mentally rehearse yourself just chipping away, going up those hills and relaxing and extending a little bit, trying to go down those hills. You know, sometimes particularly a race plan where you know there's some downhills in the latter part, just to relax your body so that you're really prepared for when those downhills come. You can just make the most of them, particularly when you're going for a time-based goal where you know you need to get some time back, or that's part of the time when you pick up some pace, is that you relax and go down those smoothly and efficiently so there's no surprises. Now, get good images of yourself performing well, get images of yourself performing well and going through difficult moments as well. Sort of mentally rehearse the negative statements that might invade your mind going through previous races where they have invaded your mind. And so if I say to myself, this isn't good enough, or I'm feeling really tired, or starting to get really negative, questioning why you've done it in the first place, then you do the if, the then part. So then I'll say to myself, it's one step at a time. Then I'll say to myself, I'll get into a rhythm and I'll pick up my rhythm. And that's where you've got images of really good rhythms that you can suddenly call into play. They'll be useful sitting there, and you just drop into your mind. You tap out the rhythm and you focus very specifically on the rhythm for the next few moments. Particularly in those difficult parts, it's about really chomping that performance down to really short sections so that you can achieve the next few moments. And really getting good images of what's going really well and has gone really well previously. And that, again, just to emphasize, can be about overcoming difficult parts of an event, so that you're confident that you can overcome those when they reoccur in the future. If they do reoccur in the future, if they don't reoccur in the future, then you're going to just pick the pace up and be even super better than you expected to. And of course, what that'll lead is that the next time you run a marathon, you'll have this really, really demanding goal, and the cycle continues, and hopefully you work towards it in a really positive way. And so finally, the best bits of advice are to get a really clear idea of your race strategy, so it's clear in your mind. Use imagery to replay that so that you have a good idea of what's coming, when it's coming, and you have strategies to cope with the really difficult moments during the event. Of those strategies, yes, you can try mental ones such as getting into a rhythm, focusing on the positive, such as saying you can do these things one step in front of the other, really simple stuff in terms of talking yourself into doing things. But also there can be physical interventions, so have your energy drink ready, so that when you start getting sensations of fatigue, you take that drink, and if that is a pre-prepared, if that's part of a pre-prepared routine where you know this drink is effective in terms of giving you an energy boost, then it will really have a positive effect on your psychological state, that you'll start feeling that you've got the energy left to keep going and keep going at the pace that you want, that's going to achieve your goals. One of those goals would be to enjoy the event. It's a long way, and you don't want to be going through there looking behind you as if someone's going to catch you, sort of thing, feeling really negatively. Just try to focus on enjoying the moment, because you don't do these things that often. And good luck.